Hey everyone, welcome to Finance Friday. Happy Friday. I'm so excited for this weekend. This is like fall festival, Halloween, so great. Finance Friday, this is the show where we transform your relationship with your money by giving you the information you need to help you grow and protect your wealth. I'm Amy Novakovich, certified financial planner and co-founder of Nova Wealth Management. As most of you may know, we also have a podcast, which we will post this on our podcast as well. It's the Nova Wealth Show on iTunes, the audio version. And then also the video version is on the Wooditch Network online. So it's the wooditchnetwork.com. Follow me on Twitter at Novakovich Amy and follow us on Instagram, Nova Wealth Management. So all this crazy, tag me here, follow me here, share this video out if you find it valuable, which I know you will. For those of you that are busy, you can take 2 seconds to share. I know you can. But going back to how busy we are, and I know I posted that in the description, family, work, social life, and finances. Are you kidding me, Amy? You're like, yeah, I don't have time to plan for tomorrow, let alone my finances. Life is crazy. And then for those of us that have a blended family, I brought in someone that manages 3 businesses. She has the Blended Family podcast and blog, which is, I listen to it. It's amazing. Even if you're not a blended family, I highly suggest that you listen to it for parenting tips, for marriage tips. It's amazing. She manages a cleaning business and then also is getting into the finance industry just like us. So we're going to put it all together today to talk family and business and finance. Please welcome Melissa Brown. Thank you so much for being here today with me. I am so excited to have you here and have this conversation. I'm super pumped.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Yeah. Can you tell everybody just a little bit real quick about the podcast? Because I know I obviously listen to it, but for the listeners, for the everybody watching out there, give them a little bit of a taste of like the podcast and the episodes that you do and the Q&A. I mean, there's so much good stuff. I just want you to tell them a little bit.
Yeah. So I started the podcast. I think it's actually almost now 4 years ago I started it because I felt like there was a need. We had a blended family of our own and we were trying to manage it for so long without any support. There really wasn't very much support out there at the time. No, not at all. And so I thought, gosh, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And I thought it would be great if I could help people avoid the same mistakes that we've made. And we talk about all kinds of things. I'm really focused on self-help. We do a lot on that. A lot of tips on how to manage and how to cope with the stress because blended families are very chaotic.
Right.
And there's a lot of stress when it comes to dealing with exes and stepchildren.
And there's all different levels. There's all different kinds.
Yeah. There's a lot of moving pieces and it's really hard to juggle and balance everything and get the kids all on track. And so that's what I do. And I'm not going to stop. I love it. I love it.
Good. But then on the side, you have 4 teenagers.
Yes.
All within 3 years, right?
Yeah. So we have a boy, he's our oldest son. He's 19. And then we have a 17-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl, and another 15-year-old girl. So yeah, we have our hands full and we're kind of in the thick of it right now. Raising teenagers, they're all on the road now. My youngest just had a birthday yesterday, so she's got her permit and it's a scary time. Like my oldest daughter, she had a car accident a couple of weeks ago.
Oh no.
She's fine. But yeah, juggling with the driving and the schedules and everything with teenagers and of course,
oh my gosh, I don't even want to. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's hard to rest when they're on the road, but tons of drama, tons of teenage stuff. But yeah, we're managing it somehow.
Guys, it's a lot of people watching. For those of you just joining, I know a lot of people are just starting to join. We're talking basically about managing family life and then on another level, blended family life. And then we will obviously get to managing that along with finances and give some tips along the way. But Melissa has the Blended Family podcast and blog. I highly suggest you check it out. But on top of the podcast and the blog and on top of the family, then you've got 2 other businesses. Right. Yes. So you've got the cleaning business that you do with your husband, which we both know how it is to work and live with our husbands.
Yes.
I love you, honey. I know he's watching. He's going out of town this week. But it is tough. It's a different world, working and living with your spouse. And then on top of that, then you're getting into our world, the finance world.
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
Well, we've been cleaning. We've had that business for over 10 years and we love it. But we found over the years it's just not, and no matter what, with 4 teenagers, it's not enough money. And we're getting older, so we can't physically clean houses for the rest of our lives. I mean, we kind of put a cap on it about 10 more years before we're physically not able to do it. I mean,
right.
right now we clean about 5 or 6 houses a day, and that can be really grueling. And then coming home and then doing the podcast and everything else. So the goal is to slowly back off of the cleaning over the next 10 years as the finance business grows. And then the podcast
Transition
is something
to
I'm just going to keep
finance.
doing. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So
That's the
as
plan.
far as managing, and we were talking a little bit about before this is where I want to start, is the finances in a blended family. So we talked about how sometimes there's child support coming in, child support going out. Sometimes there's expenses that you want to spend on some kids and then expenses for the other children. And then that can cause fights and that can cause drama. And I just want to give people obviously a lot of hope out there. So if you can give some tips, since this is a money show, but financially specifically in a blended family, what are some tips that you might have for our viewers out there? How do you try to slow down and slowly get rid of, lessen the chaos and the drama when it comes to finance in a blended family?
Right. Well, you're probably never going to lessen the chaos for a while. You just have to get to the point where you accept it. Yeah. You have to accept that it's just going to be kind of haywire in a blended family. With the finances, I think that it's really important for you and your partner to like sit down and come up with a budget. And I think that it's very easy to not come up with a budget.
Budget is sometimes a dirty word. You know, people don't like the word budget.
So maybe we should call it a plan of action or something.
A financial routine.
Yes, because what happens is it's so chaotic that we don't stop to think about where the money's going. It's kind of like you almost can't even breathe. Life is happening so fast, especially with the schedules the way they are. And every time you turn around, one of the kids needs something for something, whether it's a school expense, whether it's for a hobby, a sport. And so every time you turn around, there's just money flying out the window. And if you don't get a hold of it, you know, you can end up in some serious debt. And so a lot of people don't want to even look at it because it's scary.
Right.
We did the same thing for years. We didn't look at our finances because it was just overwhelming and we didn't want to think about it.
That's the word right there that I hear all the time. It's overwhelming and frustrating. And when I get started, I end up just shutting down.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. And a lot of people that come to me, they ask, should we have separate accounts or should we have one joint account? And question. And I don't know what you would recommend for your people, but I think it's a very personal decision. And I think it has a lot to do with where the money is coming in and where, you know, how the cash flow is.
Yeah.
Who's paying for what things? Who's paying the mortgage? Are you both paying it? Is one person paying it? Where's the child support coming in? Where's the child support going out? That has a lot to do with how you're going to manage the money, whether you're going to put everything in one joint account and pay for everything. But it's tricky because sometimes out of both partners, one person, you know, is making more money than the other person.
Right. I was just going to say liability. Sometimes you might want to shift it due to liability. If one of you is owning a business and the other stays at home, a lot of times, you know, you shift the money out of the one that owns the business because they're the one that takes out the liability. Or if one is sick or disabled or, you know, and might need care, sometimes we shift the money to the person that has less liability and less expenses. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I've seen it work both ways.
And let's not forget about child support. Even if, let's say, two people are making the same amount of money in a relationship, well, maybe one parent has tons of child support that they're paying out.
Yeah.
So then you need to account for that and you need to kind of balance that out. It can be very difficult.
Absolutely. And so when you are taking Q&A from people, so Melissa does this thing, guys, where every now and then on the podcast, she gets people live, like to ask Q&A questions on the Blended Family podcast. It's super awesome. But what would you say, and think back, sift through it a little bit for a minute, but financially, like money-wise, what would you say? Because even for regular families, I was telling you, I have somebody in here like this morning, like even for non-blended families, like we'll call it a traditional family, it's hard to manage family life and then also plan for finances. So what would you say is like the number one issue that you constantly get questions around that people just cannot get done?
Cannot get done, or a problem with finances in their blended family?
A problem with the biggest problem.
The biggest problem I think that I get all the time is people getting upset because the money divvied out between the kids isn't what they'd call fair. So in other words, you know, it's like you're spending all this money on your kids, but there's not enough money for my kids. Or I want to get my child this cell phone, but I don't have enough money to get your child that cell phone. So you're going to have to figure that out. And there's a lot of inequality and unfairness, and people argue about this. It creates a lot of issues in a marriage because everybody wants to take care of their kids, and some step parents, and it's not right, but it happens. Some step parents don't want to afford things for their other children, for their stepchildren. They'd rather put it towards their own children. And that becomes a huge point of contention.
Well, and I'm thinking about this right now as people join. If this isn't even you, if you're not in a blended family, but you have a son or a daughter that could possibly be in a blended family, or even a brother or sister that's going through this, share this out with them. Seriously. I mean, we're going to be giving away tip after tip. And actually, she already mentioned one about having the separate bank accounts and just talking it through. I've said before on different podcasts, or maybe it was an Instagram video, about actually having you both write down what you think is appropriate, like on separate sheets of paper. You both write it down, and then you kind of like exchange papers. So you're not able to verbally attack somebody. You're communicating via paper, and you're finding a happy medium in the middle. That's another way. But even if this is not you, even if you aren't a blended family, share this with somebody who is in a blended family, because I guarantee you guys, they're having these same struggles. And again, even if you're not a blended family, traditional families have this same issue of finances. Where does the money go? How do I pay for the kids' stuff? How do I know what's important? How do I know if I save for my retirement versus for the kids' college, or just a savings in emergency funds? These are all issues that families have. So I want to shift just a little bit. I know we've talked quite a bit about blended families in the podcast. I'm just curious about you personally transitioning into the finance business with a crazy family, a blended family, right?
And crazy. They're crazy and blended.
Crazy and blended. So you're transitioning from one business to another business, and you're trying to manage 4 teenagers in a blended family. What do you do in your daily routine? And I know we talk all the time, like, oh, people think, I have it together, and I really don't, but you really do. I mean, you do it. So what would you say is hey, Tom, what would you say is your tip that you do to stay efficient and make sure you get everything done for your business, your work life, and your family? Like, what do you do to stay on top of things?
So I happen to just be like a very organized person. At least I try to be. So that has a big part in it.
Do you use like a planner, or do you
I use calendars.
Like a planner.
I have my calendar, my Google Calendar, and I have calendars within my calendar. So like I have a family calendar, I have a work calendar, I have my bills calendar. Yeah. And everything is color coded and everything's labeled in there. So that way I know for each business what I need to do for that day. And then on top of that, I have lists upon lists upon, I have my—
Oh, I'm such a list person.
Yes, you have to. So I have my financial business list. I have my podcast list. I have my cleaning business list. And then I have my personal list. And then I organize it by, here's what I need to do today, and here's what I need to do for the week.
Right.
And then sometimes I'll even put, what I need to do for the month. And that's the only way that I can really stay on top of things. Because if I don't write it down, it's going to get lost.
Yeah. And then when you're dealing with, and I know this just came up for me recently with my kids, when you're dealing with something with the kids and something family, you know what I mean? How do you prioritize? I mean, obviously everybody always says like family comes first, but then hello, my job and my business supports my family, and it supports the way I give to the community. And so your job is your heartbeat, but yet your family comes first. Like people get so confused about what to prioritize. How do you prioritize if something comes up, like one of the kids, like, your daughter has a car accident, but you've got 14 houses to clean. And by the way, you've got a prospect meeting for your finance business. I mean, how do you prioritize, and you've got lists upon lists when there's a wrench in your life?
Well, there's always going to be a wrench. There's always,
you just accept it.
Yeah, if you knew how many days here at my house that something goes wrong and some kind of drama is created and we need to rearrange things. But for me, I'm a little bit luckier in that my kids are a little bit older now, so
Yeah.
they can be more responsible to deal with things themselves. But
Sometimes, but that's not always the case. Just because kids are
sometimes,
older doesn't mean they're more responsible.
well, what I'm doing now is I'm leveraging my family to do things because for the longest time, I wouldn't ask them to do anything. I was trying to do
You're
everything
asking them
myself.
to pitch in.
I'm now saying my mother-in-law lives with us too. And
Oh my
so,
gosh, on
so
top of all this?
yes. So, but now, so what I'll ask her to do is, Mom, can you start dinner or can you go to the store for me now? Because, and now that two of the kids are driving, I'll even send them to the store if I need something because I can't physically do it all. And I was trying to, and I was getting sick and you can't do that. And so I think it's really important to ask for help. And that's something that I'm learning how to do, that my husband is helping me with because I wouldn't even let him help me for the longest time. So now I'm learning how to ask for help and I'm realizing that I can't do it all and that people are going to have to chip in. And my house is not clean. I'm the cleaning lady with the not clean house, right?
Yeah, right.
But I don't have time and I'd rather spend my 2 hours doing something more productive than cleaning. And then in about 45 minutes to an hour after I clean, it's messy again because there's 7 people in my house and 3 dogs and that's just going to happen. So,
Oh my goodness. And then finances. So for those of you
yeah.
out there that are managing multiple businesses like Melissa, and you're obviously you have family and some people might have family like in the business. So do you, when you have your income coming in, do you sit down and you plan, okay, this amount of money has to go towards this business. This amount of money has to go towards advertising in this business. This amount of money has to go towards, advertising the podcast or whatever. And I know, by the way, for those of you out there that want to start podcasts, I know you get sponsors for your podcast, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. So what I tried to do for the longest time, I didn't. And so all the money was coming out of pocket and it's not super expensive to run a podcast, but it's not cheap either. It does cost money to run a website and the time, it's really the time I put into it that I'm not getting paid for. So I do have a couple of sponsors, but I try to keep that to a minimum because I don't feel right just filling my show with advertisements, but I do have some and I have everything in a separate account. So the podcast is in its own account. So whatever money comes in from either donations or sponsorships, I use that money and I do coaching now too, blended family coaching. So all of that money stays in that account. And then that is used to pay for anything podcast related.
Okay.
And then,
so you keep everything very separated because a lot of people with multiple businesses do not.
Really?
Really?
I feel like if I did that, that would be really confusing for me. I have a separate bank account for each thing.
Okay.
I have a separate website for each thing. I have a separate calendar for each thing. And I think that that's really important when it comes to being organized and to try to balance everything. I think it's really important to keep it separated so things don't get confusing.
Okay. So when business income comes in from one business, you only use that money for that business.
Yes.
What if one of the businesses though is the one that's struggling and there's another one? Like what if your cleaning business is the one that's supporting you and your family and has all the income and you're trying to grow your finance business? Don't you allocate some of those funds towards the growth of the other business? I mean, at some point you have to, right?
Yeah. So the cleaning business is our money maker. That's the one that brings in all of the money. And so, yes, I've had to do that. The finance business isn't really costing us anything right now. We're growing it. Yeah. So there's really no overhead there. So I don't have to worry about that too much yet. And the podcast, like I said, I keep that separate. So yeah, there has been times that I've had to do that, of course, because I told you for many, many years, it was unorganized and unbudgeted and just a big mess with finances for a long time until I got a hold of things.
I'm just reading some of the comments. Yes. Hi, Tom. I actually remembered. Very impressive. So for those of you just joining, we're definitely talking a lot about blended families today because I've got Melissa Brown here from the Blended Family podcast and blog, which I highly suggest you guys check out. There's all kinds of tips. Again, even if you're not a blended family, parenting tips, marriage tips. I mean, seriously, I've learned so much from Melissa. And then she's also getting into the finance world and runs 3 businesses with 4 teenagers. So we're just talking about balancing family life, planning for finances, and going over some tips, obviously, for families, blended families, and finance. So we're covering a lot today. So again, I want to transition a little bit to your finance business. So are you trying to now advise people that only have blended families, or you're really not focusing on just blended families in finance? You're really growing like a general practice of.
Yeah, so we're actually with World Financial Group.
Okay.
It's a huge company with
Right.
over 50,000 associates. So we're part of that, and our mission is no family left behind. And what we're trying to do is educate families, mostly middle income America, that that don't have the education, that don't know what they're doing with their money, and they're getting ignored by some of the larger financial corporations that won't work with them unless they have enough money. And
Right.
so
We get
we're
those
out
too.
and we're trying to educate people on how to make money, how to save money, and make sure that it's all going in the right place so that they don't end up like most of America that are older and that don't have a retirement set up and that don't know
Right.
what they're doing. So we have a mission, and we're trying to get out there and speak to as many people as we can and help them.
Good for you. So that's the education piece. I mean, that's the whole reason why we do this show. The entire reason is because we need to get education out, the transparency, especially like in our industry, and just so many people have no idea about finances. And like I said, you throw finances on top of, I have to get a kid to soccer tonight, I have to run her to her dad's house or whatever, like, you on top of blended families and kids and work, it's just crazy. And people don't prioritize finances, let alone know where to allocate funds. So that's awesome that you're doing that. I love your mission. And that's absolutely what we want to do too. So when we're talking blended families, let's define really what that is. So you talk to all kinds of families, step parenting, which those of you obviously know that I'm a stepmom to two wonderful twins, a boy and a girl. They're 12 going on 13. And then we have our own two kids, 4 and a 2-year-old. So we have two different, the age gap, which we've talked about, which is a challenge in and of itself, whether you're a blended family or not, just having two sets of different ages. But then also there's adoptive parents, there's foster parents, there's families that bring in children from two different marriages that don't have kids together. I mean, there is all different forms. So is there anything that's consistent? Like, is there any advice that we can give out there that's consistent no matter what type of blended family you have? We just want you to know this. Like, is there any consistent advice to try to really help better their overall fluidness of their life? Is it that they need to just submit a little bit more and not be so judgmental and so critical? Is it, what's the advice that we can give blanket to all blended families to help them?
There's so much blanket advice I could give, but one of the biggest tips I think is really about communication, because I think that if you don't have that, your blended family can really quickly fall apart because people don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to say what's really bothering them. They feel like if I say this, it's going to cause a problem. And so then they swallow it and they bury it and they don't talk about it. And then something will come up and then everything just later. Out. Yeah. So I think it's super important to maintain communication. This is for any family. This is for any relationship, anybody. Communication is key for any relationship and for any family to really grow, I think.
I was saying on your podcast, when I was on your podcast, I was saying one of our tips that we do is, because as you know, we're very blessed and very fortunate. We have a really good situation with our blended family, but I try to always think of it like a partnership. Like, even if you're not in business with someone, you can still think of them like, okay, this is my business. This is my partner. I'm a partner with them, whether you like it or not. Just like if you get into business with somebody and it ends up, down the road, you think, oh, this isn't such a great relationship. Well, for the time being, you're still in business with that person. So you have to do what's right to put the business in the right direction. So even if you don't like it, you are in business, you are in a partnership with that person, no matter what you think of them. Do what's best for the business, which is the kids,
Right.
You have to put the kids first. So I would say that's probably my blanket advice, to just run it like a partnership. And I actually tell all our families when I'm giving financial advice to say, run your family like a business. So if you were a business and you needed to be profitable and you needed to get to a certain spot in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, where would you allocate the money to make sure your business gets there? So if that is college savings, because you're certain your children are going to go to college and you are also certain, by the way, that you are going to pay for their college, Because I've had people put all their efforts towards college saving and then get to college and they're like, you know what? I wanted my kids to work. I wanted my kids to work and pay for their own college, and I was willing to give them X amount anyways, and then I was done. So all that college savings should have actually been towards retirement. So you have to sit and at least prioritize your goals and what you actually want. Don't just think you have to go through the motions and have to do everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
So would you say in the world of finances and the way you personally do things, would you say that like with blended families that you have a specific system of I put this much towards retirement, I put this much towards my family, I put this much towards my business, and that's just the way it is? Or are you always adjusting?
For me personally, I'm always adjusting, but I would like it to be where I could have set things, and I'm trying to get to that point. I'm trying to get organized, but we are playing catch up in my family from years and years of struggling with trying to raise all the kids and not always having the help that we need. And the kids are very, very expensive. And so right now we're just trying to get things going and get things all allocated in the right place. But eventually I'd like to have a more structured system. That's what I'm working towards myself.
Oh, that's awesome. And so for those of you just joining us, we have Melissa Brown here from the Blended Family podcast and blog. And again, I highly suggest you check it out. It's on, obviously on iTunes. Is it anywhere else? Is it on a website? Can you tell people how to find you and how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely. Just go to blendedfamilypodcast.com, and that is my website, and that will take you to everything that we have. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're everywhere. And we've got a Facebook group, we've got a Facebook page. I think I'm on Twitter, but the easiest way to do it, just blendedfamilypodcast.com.
You said, I think I'm on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram yet, but I'm working on that. So
are you going to be shifting out of your cleaning business? Are you going to be trying to focus more on the podcast too? Like the coaching? You said now you're doing blended family coaching.
Yes, I love to help people. And so that's really, the cleaning business is more like I started it when I got divorced the first time, and I really needed to survive. And I had 2 little children. They were only 3 and 6 at the time. So I did what I knew how to do. And I started but I didn't think that I was going to love it. And I didn't think that I was going to stick with it. I thought this was just going to be temporary, but the business got so successful and I really enjoy it. So I never expected it to last over 10 years. But like I said, it doesn't feed my passion. It doesn't feed my heart. I can't really, I'm helping people in a way. I guess I'm cleaning their house, but it's not the same. And so I love helping families. And that's why with the finance thing, that's really good, because now I can help blended families with all of the blended family issues. And then I can also help them with finances. So, and finances are a huge issue in blended families. Absolutely. So I'm kind of going to have it go all together. Yeah.
So when you're helping blended families and finances, I think, like you said, you hit it on the head. One of the biggest issues is, should I give money to this child, or should I put put more money to these kids and not these kids? Man, how do you work through that? Like, so I know for us, like, thank goodness, but my husband and I are in business together. So all the money comes from the same place. But when you've got, like you said, one spouse earning more than the other, and you've got children from different marriages, and you've got to deal with ex-spouses that may or may not be making money. I mean, seriously, like when you're coaching people, what do you do? What do you tell people? Like, I think this is where we're going to have to end it, because this is probably the number one thing that you said that you deal with, that you get the questions on, but this is the number one thing that people want to know most, I think, probably on watching this, is how do I financially get it right in my blended family? How do I know when to freak out, when to really legitimately be like, oh, this is a problem, and when to let it go? Like, what are you going to advise people? How do you advise people?
Well, I think there is no really wrong or right way. I think it really depends on the couple and their family and what works for them. And I think it's just about sitting and getting clear on what they want. What do you want? What do you want in your relationship? What do you want for your kids? What's important to you? Is savings important? Is retirement important? Is college fund important? And sometimes people don't agree. So the first step, I think, is just getting clear on what you want and coming to a compromise, and then getting down on paper like exactly what your goals are, because most people don't even write down their goals and their dreams. And that's really important, because you need to have a vision of where you're going to go. And if you don't have a vision, you're not paying attention, and you're just going to spend that money, and you're not even going to have a plan. So you need to have a plan. That is the most important thing. Yeah.
And I think another big thing is, if you're so busy arguing about, well, I think I'm right because of this, and I think I'm right because of this, and you do this and you do this, and accusing, you're not spending time on the fact is we have to find a solution.
That's right.
You have to find a middle ground. So instead of keeping score and doing this back and forth, I do this, I want this, you do this, you're bad at this, I think this, you think this, sit down and just say, okay, what can we do to find that middle ground?
Yeah, because you want to be happy. Yeah, you want to be happy. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about, do we want to be happy here? Because that's the most important piece, is like, you can't, not everyone's going to agree on everything, but you need to come to a place where you can compromise and where you can come up with something that makes you both at least satisfied, even if it's not perfect, because you're never going to have an ideal situation, especially in a blended family. There's just so much going on. So you just have to make it work.
It's going to have to be a compromise, because when you're talking finances and kids, talk about two personal things. If you're going to just try to play, well, me, well, I want this, and I think you should do this, and you should do this, you're never going to be happy. Like you said, like Melissa said, if you're going to be happy, then you have to sit down and be like, okay, instead of talking about what I want and what you want, let's talk about what we can do in the middle.
Yes.
Where's the solution?
Yes. And I think it's important for people to realize that the kids are not going to be there forever. At least we hope not. And that one day they're going to move out. So fighting over money is silly, because this is a temporary situation. You're not always going to have these kids and these expenses. Eventually they're going to grow up. They're going to move out of the house. And then it's just going to be the two of you. And so it's really important for people to remember that, because it doesn't feel like that when you're in it. When you're in it, it feels like it's always going to be like this, and it's so stressful, and you forget that this is just temporary.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of temporary, the market pullback is just temporary, guys. Like, the market will come back. The world is not coming to an end. I just had to throw that in there because obviously we ended on another down day, but we'll do another live a different day about the market. But any lasting thoughts? We're going to wrap it up here. Any lasting thoughts that you want to leave with viewers? Anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about?
Gosh.
If that isn't a blanket question.
I know there's always so much involved. The only thing that I would say, like when you said before to put the kids first, I think that's super important. And I just want to point out the importance of keeping fairness with the kids, because the kids notice. And it's really like Christmas.
Now that your kids are older, you know what they notice.
Yeah. I mean, on holidays and birthdays and things like that, kids will notice if things aren't equal. And, you know, so when your kids are younger, let's just talk about Christmas for a minute. I know not everybody celebrates, but when the kids are young, you're not so concerned about spending the equal amount of money. You're more concerned about having the equal amount of gifts, right? Because kids are going to notice, well, how come they have 5 gifts and I only have 3 or whatever?
Right.
As they get older, they start to realize and understand what things cost. And then they know, okay, well, that's not equal. They got this, you know, $300 computer and I only got this, you know? So I think it's really important to keep things equal. And one of the biggest problems with blended families is that we can't control what kids are getting in the other homes. And and so just to use like myself as an example, when my kids were young, my daughters would get a lot from their dad and from that house for holidays and things like that. And my husband's ex, she didn't have the means to do that. So she would be getting the kids less. And so they'd come over to the house, you know, where we're all together, and they would compare. And that always seemed unfair. And so it's important to remember that we have no control over what goes on at the other houses. We can only control what goes on here. And so we would always keep things as fair as we possibly could. And of course, you can't always control for certain things. Certain things just cost more money when it comes to sports and hobbies. But when it comes to like gifts and doing things for the kids, then I think it's really important to keep things fair, because they will notice and it'll cause resentment down the road.
Oh, that's so good, because like exactly what you just said in that situation, in that exact situation, if the other household is getting them less because they can afford less and you can get them more and you're able to get them more. And obviously a lot of people would say, well, you know, I want my kids to want to come to my house more. And like, it's such a selfish thing. And I don't want to like put anybody down or anything, but have grace for others. Like, the definition of grace is to give them something they don't deserve. So even if you think that ex is wrong 90% of the time, and you hate her and you just think they're an awful human being and they did your husband wrong or whatever, give them grace and just try to treat them like how you would want to be treated. This is their kids, and you never know what they've been through or what they're going through today, what they've been through in their whole life. Like, just try to not see everything from your perspective only. Just have grace and not have so much judgment. I guess that would be my 2 cents on how
And
we
that's
run.
that's the number one thing on my show that I teach people is shift your perspective. It's not
Shift
all about you. You need to understand what other people are going through and see something from their eyes. And that really makes a huge difference,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to manage a blended family and everybody's emotions and the way everybody feels. It's important to understand that everybody has their own feelings about things.
Yeah. And there's a lot to get upset about. So if you try, you can always be upset if you want.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
That's so true. Well, thank you, Melissa, for being here so much. I appreciate you so much. And everybody, you got to go check out her podcast. Again, even if you're not a blended family, seriously, parenting advice, marriage advice. I just love you so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Have an awesome weekend.
You too.